Okay, so we're going to deep dive into this Jeju air crash that just happened in South Korea. And we've got a news report and then also like a New York Times article that focuses on the type of Boeing involved. But what like really got me, I don't know if you saw this, but there's this text message from one of the passengers, and it's just chilling. They say, should I say my last words? And like, I mean, imagine if you got that from someone you know. It just makes this whole thing so real.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? Like you've got all these statistics and news reports, but then just that one little text message, it kind of like cuts through it all, and suddenly it's not just numbers anymore, it's real people, you know?
Yeah, totally. And the news report goes into like the specifics of the crash. It was a Boeing 737-800, pretty common model, I think. It was flying from Thailand to South Korea.
Uh-huh.
And apparently there was like a problem with the landing gear. So the pilots had to try like a go around, where they like abort the landing and try to circle back around to try it again. But it didn't end well, obviously. Like it crashed into a barrier and then, burst into flames.
Oh, wow. That's it's tough to hear, you know. But that go-around procedure, it's actually, it's super important. It's a safety maneuver, right? And pilots are trained to do it if anything feels off about the landing. And usually it actually works, like it prevents accidents. But in this case, I guess if the landing gear was already messed up, maybe that made the go-around just, I don't know, too difficult.
Right. And that's where this whole bird strike theory comes in. I mean, it's crazy, right? Like the same passenger who sent that text, they mentioned seeing a bird stuck in the wing, like almost as if they knew, right, that
Right.
something was wrong. And the official report also says that the pilots got a bird strike warning just before the crash. So, but how common are bird strikes really? I mean, are they something that pilots have to deal with all the time?
Well, they happen more than you'd think, especially during like takeoff and landing. Because, the plane's closer to the ground, that's where the birds are. It's something that, pilots are trained for. But I mean, how serious it is really just depends. I mean, a small bird, maybe it just causes a little bit of damage, no big deal. But a bigger bird, if it hits like a really important part of the plane,
Mm.
then, it could be a really big problem.
So it's not just like if it hits, but like where it hits, right?
Yeah.
And how big the bird is. That's
Right.
no,
Yeah.
that makes sense. And I guess in this case, we don't really know yet, what role the bird strike played in the landing gear failing.
Exactly, yeah, and that's where this, the black box comes in. And it's not just some mysterious metal box, right? It's actually, there's two recorders in there. And they keep track of like a ton of information about the flight. One of them records all the technical stuff, like altitude and speed and, like the positions of all the controls and everything. And then the other one, that records the conversations in the cockpit.
Oh, so it's like flight data plus a cockpit recording.
Yeah, exactly. And by analyzing all that data, the investigators can figure out what happened in those last few moments. They're going to be looking for anything that seems weird, right? Anything unusual that the pilots did, anything that might show, what went wrong with the landing gear.
It's like having a log
Yeah,
of like the last moments of the flight.
yeah. It's a really important tool for understanding, how it all happened, how it led to the crash. And it's going to be key to figuring out the role of that bird strike, if it played any role at all, and if there was anything else, that contributed to it all.
Yeah, definitely. It'll be interesting to see what they find out, as they go through all that data.
For sure. I mean, it's a tragedy, but hopefully we can learn something from it, and maybe prevent something like this from happening again.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the most important thing, right? To learn from these events and try to make things safer for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's like putting together a puzzle, a really complicated one. And it's not just about the plane, right? We can't forget about the people. There were 179 people who died in this crash. Most of them were from South Korea, but there were two people from Thailand, too.
Yeah, it's just awful thinking about their families, waiting at the airport. And then, I mean, what about those two crew members who survived? They got out, but can you imagine what that must have been like?
I mean, the trauma of going through something like that, just seeing it all happen and being right there in the middle of it. I mean, how do you even begin to process that?
It makes you wonder, in those last few seconds, did they even realize what was happening? Like, did it even sink in? I bet their testimony is going to be really important for the investigation.
Oh, absolutely. They might be able to tell us things that nobody else knows, like what was going on in the cockpit, what the pilots were doing, what warnings they got. All those details could be really crucial.
Speaking of those warnings, you mentioned before that bird strikes are a known risk. So is there anything pilots can do about them? Like, I don't know, do they have a special button or something?
I wish it were that simple. It really depends on a lot of things, like how big the bird is, how fast it's going, how high the plane is, what they're doing at that moment. I mean, yeah, there's procedures and training, but a lot of it comes down to the pilot's judgment.
So they have to assess the situation, right? Talk to air traffic control,
Yeah.
and then just make the best decision they can. It could be a lot of different things, like maybe keep flying, maybe divert to a different airport, maybe even try an emergency landing.
Exactly. And in this case, it sounds like they tried to land first, right? And then the landing gear failed, so they had to try that go around. It just shows how these accidents can happen, like a whole chain of events.
Yeah, it's like that saying, right? For want of a nail.
Hmm.
One little thing goes wrong, then another, and then suddenly it's a huge disaster.
That's a good way to put it. And that's why these investigations are so important. They don't just stop at the obvious cause. They try to find everything that contributed to it, anything that could have been done differently.
But we can learn from it, right?
Yeah.
And try to prevent it from happening again. Because even one person dying is one too many.
That's right. But I think it's also important to remember how much safer flying has become. Over the years, I mean, statistically, it's safer than ever before. And that's because of all the research and innovation and, learning from past accidents.
So you're saying there's hope for the future of aviation.
Oh, definitely. We learn, we adapt, we get better. And that's how we can honor the people we've lost, by making flying safer for everyone else.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a really complex issue. And it all goes back to that text message. You know, should I say my last words? It just reminds you that there are real people at the heart of this.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the technical stuff, the procedures, the investigations. But ultimately, this is about people, about families who lost loved ones, survivors dealing with the trauma, a whole community affected by this.
And it reminds us that even with all our technology, we're still vulnerable, whether it's a bird strike, a mechanical problem, whatever. There are things we can't control that can change our lives in an instant.
And that's what makes this so powerful, I think. It's like a wake-up call. It reminds us to appreciate life, to make the most of every moment. And it also makes us think about aviation safety in a different way. Like, how do we balance the risk of bird strikes with everything else? Aircraft design, pilot training. Is there more we could be doing to protect passengers and crew?
It's tough, isn't it? Like you want flying to be as safe as possible. But you also have to accept that there's always going to be some risk.
Yeah, you can't eliminate every single risk, that's for sure. And that's what the investigators are going to have to figure out, right? What exactly happened in this case? And hopefully, maybe we can learn from it and come up with some even better safety measures for the future.
Because in the end, it's all about people, right?
Mm.
About making sure that everyone's safe. And I think that text message, should I say my last words?
Hmm.
It really makes you think about that,
It's a powerful reminder that these aren't just, accidents. They affect real people, real families, and it's those individual stories that really make it hit home.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in all the technical details. But we can't forget about the human side of things.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from this whole deep dive.
It's been it's been a tough one, for sure. But thanks for being here and helping us break it all down.
It's been my pleasure, and I hope everyone listening keeps thinking about these issues, asking questions, and staying informed about aviation safety.
Yeah, it's an important conversation to have. And on that note, I think we'll wrap things up for today. Thanks for tuning into this deep dive, everyone.